The nation's longest-running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is the official companion podcast to the upcoming MPB original documentary, focusing on the life of Medgar Evers. The companion podcast, hosted by me, Rita Brent, will feature in-depth conversations, extended interviews, and exclusive archive footage not shown in the documentary. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, video and audio episodes premiere September 18th. Find it on mpbonline.org or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
What's happening, Mississippi? You have found the Sit Down with Russ Latino right here on MPB Think Radio. We try and explore the ideas and the people that are shaping Mississippi's future. Today, we're going to do a little bit of that with House Speaker Jason White. You know, no sooner do you think that the legislature is done for the year and you can finally take your wallets out of hiding, then they are planning to come back. Speaker White, good to see you again.
Good to be here, Russ. Good to be with you.
And I'm teasing, but obviously, this legislative session was extended. So normally you're done at the end of March, maybe in that first year at the end of April. You guys had to come back and do a little budget work.
We did. And it was, it was a little bit anticlimactic after what we considered a huge session with House Bill 1 and that huge legislative victory as we felt it was in the House. We should have been celebrating but there was this weird feeling because we left without a budget. Now, it's a nuance and most people don't care, but we didn't extend session and we left with days in bank. So it didn't cost the taxpayers any more money than if we had been there and finished like we should have. So not that matters, but some folks get hung up on that, and so you didn't do it and cost taxpayer money. It actually didn't. We were still within our budget and within our legislative days, but the legislative calendar, it played out, if you will, and so we banked days and came back. And maybe that was good to have a cooling off period after the politics had gotten so hot. Because of House Bill 1 and all that flowed from that.
So I had this conversation with Grant Callen and Rebecca Staples about a month ago when we were kind of assessing from an outsider point of view the legislative session. And I said, actually, I thought it worked out as well as it could have worked out for lots of reasons. I mean, one, I think doing the budget in the special session, now it doesn't need to become a yearly thing, but doing it that way probably cut out some of the fat that might have otherwise have been there.
It's no doubt it did.
It focused you a little bit. So you probably ended up with a better budget number from a fiscal conservative standpoint than you otherwise would have. And then to your point, you were able to step back from a couple months. Legislative session, by the end of the session, people don't like each other very much. It's just part of it.
All their bills have died, and everybody knows who killed it, and they're mad. And that bleeds over into budget fights that really should be a separate,
But,
thing.
I think you guys ended up in a good place. I do think sometimes, you, as a policy wonk, which I think sort of I am, I look at it and it's very easy to say, well, this didn't happen and this didn't happen, and to ignore all the stuff that did happen. Right. And the nature of the process is some really good stuff's going to die. Some really bad stuff occasionally is going to live.
Yep.
But if you look at it in totality, I mean, you guys took a big step towards addressing PERS. Obviously, HB 1 is probably the biggest bill I've seen passed by the legislature in the time that I can remember covering it.
Sure.
You guys have continued to do good things in the education space. I know there's more you want to do. And then the budget number came in at a responsible place.
It did.
So you look at all that, and it's like, there's a lot of good stuff that happened.
It was. And maybe we put more of a focus on fiscal restraint. And if you're going to cut income tax, you have to make a commitment there, because I've been in the room, and it's terribly easy when everybody's fighting for their project or fighting for their idea. And newsflash, but unfortunately, so many new ideas or great ideas or policy ideas around the Capitol come with a price tag. And it's other people's money, and it's easy to spend other people's money. So if you're going to stick that flag in the ground that we are going to be a no-income tax state, and that is a conversion issue for us because we've been addicted to the personal income tax, and now we're breaking ourselves from it. You're going to have to make a commitment to not grow that budget. And I won't apologize for the things. There's some big ticket items the last few years that have increased our budget. The new funding formula, as well as the teacher pay, that got us off the bottom. Now, our sister states have gotten back with us, but I would also, I hear that argument a lot, but I also know that our cost of living is less. The average compensation a lawyer makes in Mississippi is less than so many others. You can extrapolate that as far as you want. I still want us to be very competitive in that space, and not, especially for our border areas, not lose to surrounding states with our teacher pay. So I don't apologize for the increases that resulted in those pay raises, as well as that funding formula that got us to a place where the argument is no longer about money when it comes to our K-12 public schools. We can argue about some other things, but don't hit me with, well, y'all just aren't supporting. If you'll just give us the money, we'll show you. Because most of our gains have been because of things other than money. In spite of money, we've made some fabulous gains there that everybody's now all of a sudden is touting those, so to speak. So focusing on keeping that budget number down was a goal from the very beginning of session, knowing where we were headed with these tax cuts, because you can't do both. You gotta make a concerted effort, or that number just keeps going up.
Yeah, you guys don't have the luxury of operating like Washington, D.C., right?
That's right.
Washington can cut taxes and increase spending at the same time. We just
saw it.
We may have just seen it, right? And then the debt piles up, and at some point there is going to be a negative effect of all of that. But you don't have that luxury.
That's right.
Constitutionally, you don't have that luxury. Candidly, as a matter of fiscal responsibility, you shouldn't have that luxury. And so it makes a ton of sense. It is interesting to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, is like, you guys have clearly increased education spending by a lot.
Yep.
Right? The teacher pay raise was, I think, $250 million on an annual basis. It's probably more than that over time as you see the step up, right? And there are built-in step ups that people don't often talk about. And then obviously with the education funding formula, that's a huge number. I mean, cumulatively, if you looked at 10 years ago to today, you're spending about $800 million more on K-12 education than you were just 10 years ago.
Right.
But
percentage-wise of the budget, it's about the same. It's grown a little bit, but not much as a percentage of the overall budget. Now, that's not an excuse to blow the top out of budgets. I'm just saying we're still spending about half of our money.
Yeah.
K-12 and IHO.
I guess my question is this, like, to this day, there are still people out there that would suggest that you're cutting education to the bone, that you are being draconian towards education. How do you respond to those folks? Or, I mean, do you view it as just being a not a credible argument?
It's not a credible argument, and I've gotten jaded about it. Like used to, I would want to engage in that argument and show the things that you're talking about. And then I realized it's never enough. It doesn't matter the number. For the folks that are in that camp, that's always going to be the answer, not reform, not thinking about a different way, to skin the cat, or not looking at what other states are doing or that have been successful. Most of the things that and I know we don't fit a lot of molds compared to other states, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Things are being done in other places where you can go and say, look, if we want to look like that, let's copy, let's see if that works here. And it has been neat for once. Now when we go places, people actually want to talk to us about what we're doing in Mississippi. And that has not been the case in my 12, 13 years before the last year or two. You know what I'm saying? Now they're like, how did y'all do that? Wait, let's talk about this or that. And usually we're like, boy, we hope they don't look over here,
Well, I can tell you.
The game has changed for sure.
When I go to policy conferences in other parts of the country, Mississippi is very frequently a subject of conversation, whether it's the income tax policy, whether it's the gains that we've seen in reading and math scores on the NAEP. Those are things that people are talking about, and not at a surface level, at a how do we emulate this level. I've got buddies of mine who are legislators in Arkansas who, as soon as you guys passed HB1, started calling me and saying, how did y'all do that exactly? What does it look like? They wanted to walk through the details because they're trying to compete with us. Right. And so that's a unique place to be in for Mississippi.
It is, yeah. It's actually cool for once, to be the new kid, to be that kid.
So, we're at a stage, though, where it's like, okay, you did that. What have you done for me lately? What's coming up? And you have announced sort of an agenda moving forward going into 2026. We've got about a minute before break. Well, you just hit me with the high points, and when we come back, we'll dig into each one of them.
Yeah, for us, that worked good last year on House Bill 1. Like, let's pick our big issue that we want to spend most of our time, attention, and brain matter on, and let's focus on it and try to get the right people in the room. And so for us last year, that was tax reform and looking at PERS and our infrastructure. This year, it's going to be education. I'm calling it education freedom. I'm not afraid of the word school choice. I will tell you, the big, beautiful bill changes kind of the way we were thinking about this as far as, from a House standpoint, how we wanted to attack it. So, but we're excited about the possibilities now that Congress has and President Trump has going to afford our state. We just got to be willing to take advantage of it and do it right.
So education is number one in your book.
Education is number one for the House this coming session. We're going to spend most of our time in this offseason focusing on that.
Okay. So we got to take a brief break. We're talking with House Speaker Jason White. When we come back, we'll dig into education, maybe talk about what's going on in Jackson, new opportunities there. I know you want to do some stuff in the election space as well. And PERS is still out there, right? You took one big step, but there's a lot more to do with that. We'll try and cover all of that, jamming in the next 45 minutes. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We'll be right back.
Support for MPB.
The nation's longest running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival, comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, is the official companion podcast to the upcoming MPB original documentary, focusing on the life of Medgar Evers. The companion podcast, hosted by me, Rita Brent, will feature in-depth conversations, extended interviews, and exclusive archive footage not shown in the documentary. Everlasting, the Legacy Podcast, video and audio episodes premiere September 18th. Find it on mpbonline.org or wherever you get your podcasts. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We're talking today with House Speaker Jason White. Before the break, started to talk a little bit about the 2026 agenda. What have you done for me lately? You were mentioning education is going to be your number one priority. You also alluded to something that I think people may not understand is the one big beautiful bill had tax stuff in it. It had new spending in it. It had spending cuts in it. There was also some educational components in the bill.
It was a huge one, and it kind of flew under the radar, but it follows very closely with President Trump's agenda and where he had said school choice is going to be part of my national agenda and mantra moving forward. And so that piece of the legislation survived. It didn't get a lot. It got nuanced at the end, and it wasn't It wasn't quite as robust as it started out in the Senate, but it got nuanced a little bit to the point where it requires states to opt in. So it's not just the law of the land. It's going to be like some state and federal programs that currently exist throughout our land. It will require our state to opt in. Now, I had first thought that looked like legislative opt-in. After actually reading the bill, it looks like the governor himself or herself in any state can opt the state in unless there's some specific provision of state law that doesn't allow the governor to do that. So it looks like simply by a letter from our governor could start that program for us. And what it looks like is, and again, a lot of people think they saw the $1,700 dollar for dollar federal tax credit on your personal income tax. That is not for your child that might go to a non-public school for tuition credit towards that. You can donate that amount. Any individual can donate that amount to a non-governmental scholarship organization. And those things already exist. I'm sure some new ones will form probably even in our state that play in that space. And what they do is they would aggregate all those credits. In other words, if you decided you wanted to do that, you and your wife, that'd be a $3,400 dollar for dollar tax deduction.
Yeah.
You could designate where you want that going. I like the way this group does it. It's not a school. It's a group that doles out scholarships. Yours would go there, and they would aggregate those to the point where they've got enough to start receiving applications from individuals who want to do something that is not, attend a private school that requires tuition, and they would dole those out. Now, the federal requirements are that only people eligible are up to 300% of the federal poverty level, which for a family of four would be about $95,000 in Mississippi. So you would get a huge swath of Mississippi kids, K-12, that would be eligible for those tax credit scholarships. And that does kind of change the way in the House that we were looking at our choice. We were going to start with kids in poverty. We already have an ESA program. We wanted to expand that for military families, maybe even first responder families, fire police. They have trouble recruiting men and women into those vocations now. That would be another nugget, but you're eligible for ESAs. So include them maybe in addition to special needs and military families, and then low income. There's always been this focus on, we'll start our choice programs in failing school districts. Well, failing school districts really don't tell the full story now. You can have a decent school district rating that has failing schools in it. And our accountability system, we only have 1 or 2 Fs in the whole state. Now, if you believe that, So
38% of our kids are proficient in reading, which means 62 aren't.
That's correct.
And we're saying that there are only 1 or 2 F schools. The system's broken.
That's right. And I will give MD some credit. They acknowledge that, and they blame it on the pandemic and the hold harmless and all that, and it's going to reset this coming year. Regardless, I wanted to just move away from that. It's supposed to be about choice and parents and what's best for your kid. We trust the Latinos to decide what you're going to feed them tonight for supper, what clothes they're going to wear, if you're going to go to church or not. All the other things. I don't know why we check that authority at the door when it comes to probably the most important thing other than food and shelter, and that's their education and the forming of who they're going to turn into. And so,
100%. And look, every family's different too, right? I mean, the white family may very well look at it and say, hey, we want this type of education for our child because it's consistent with our religious values, right? And we want to make sure they're taught certain things from a value perspective that fit our family values. There are all sorts of reasons that people make choices. Some of them are directly about academic rigor.
Right.
Some of them have to do with, does this fit our belief system?
Exactly. And that's what our country was founded on. I don't know how we got this so. And again, it's not a shot at public school. I tell people all the time. And that's why I like to say Republicans, we've put our money where our mouth is when it comes to supporting K-12 traditional public education. And it's no secret that most families prefer that. You look at states with universal school choice, the take rate is still less than 10%. Most people prefer their local public school in their community, where most of them themselves went to school. They like that. And the community, rallies around that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what makes a lot of our communities great. But to say that one size fits all is the way we're going to go, especially now that we're surrounded. We say we want to be competitive. That's part of what led to our income tax elimination fight, so to speak, or to get there, that whole hurdle. Other things, whether you talk about the state flag, like we could go down all these other big things, we want to compete. And we're not just competing with our southern states, we're competing with the world, the entire nation and the world. This is one more piece that we're surrounded now by states who allow it. Our Mississippi family should be able to take advantage of choice on some level. And I'm determined to get us there some kind of way. I understand the naysayers, and we have a complicated history in our past, especially how our private schools popped up. There's no denying that. As integration happened and that sort of thing. It's 50 years ago. It's time for us to kind of carve a new path.
Well, and look, there are gold standard studies across the country that show that the beneficiaries of these programs are minority and disadvantaged children in a 100%. lot of instances. It's interesting. I watched the debate. I think it was called the Promise Act in the Senate. It was the bill that you guys had to allow for tax credits if you donate money.
Children's Promise Act.
Promise Act directly to a private school. And some of the mantra, even coming from conservative Republican senators, was sort of like no public dollars to private schools. Well, first of all, the Children's Promise Act wasn't public dollars. It literally was a tax credit if Jason decides to give money to private schools. But that mantra doesn't ring true in any other area of government. Mm-mm. We allow government to make economic development investments in private business, right? I don't hear any of those people arguing against Pell Grants, which is government money that can be spent at a private university.
Look at healthcare. The billions that flow
into private enterprise.
Yeah.
So at some level, we recognize that private enterprise is capable of doing good things in all of these other spaces. But in this one particular space, we sort of mechanically recite this mantra of no public dollars to private schools. The point isn't the school. The point is the kid.
The point is the kid. And that's what, I've tried to bring our focus back in our Republican caucus in the House to. The conversation should start with the kid and the parents. And then really for me, maybe even the teachers before we get to the system. And it seems like the conversation always starts with the system. We don't want to mess this up. And then now I hear people say, well, we got all these great gains. You're going to blow that up. This is not what this is about. I think if anything, it makes it go this way.
Well, and look, I would argue just the conversation around education freedom has probably made some school systems stand up and say, we got to deliver a better product.
Yep.
Right? And I mean, you talk about the fact that we already do an ESA for special needs. We have the dyslexia scholarship program. There are all these programs out there that already allow for some of that competition in the marketplace for very niche audiences. I think all of that probably has made public schools realize we got to do a better job.
Yep.
And to their credit, they have stepped up and done that.
They have.
And it's impressive what they've done. But by the same token, we're still 60+% of kids who aren't proficient in reading.
There's plenty of room there. And look, our new superintendent of State Department of Education, Lance Evans, Dr. Evans, extremely competitive guy. I've enjoyed getting to know him. He's a public school guy, as he should be. He's running that organization. Extremely competitive. He will step it up. Like this will be, he will see this as a challenge. He will accept it, and he'll drive change and positive energy for our public schools. I'm not worried about that part of it at all. I'm wanting to pivot the conversation a little bit and let's get it back to kids and parents who, newsflash for everybody, they're the taxpayers. They're the ones paying the bills to begin with. For all of this stuff. And some reason, we don't have any money. And I know that's sappy, and politicians say, we don't have any money except what we take out of your pocket. But somewhere we've lost that part of this connection here. When people say, well, the parents, this is the school system. They took the money out of the parents' pockets. That's who's paying for this, one way or another.
At every level of government, local property taxes, state taxes, federal taxes. So sometimes when we talk about things like education freedom or school choice, it sounds ubiquitous, or to the average person, they're like, I don't actually know what that means. What are the sort of individual policies that you guys are looking at as you start the push to 2026?
Specifically in that, we would the hope for us or the drive for us will be that our state opt into this program that the Big Beautiful Bill allows. Those organizations get set up, families can apply. That tuition would follow through, those federal tax credits would follow and pay that tuition. Now, it's a little vague. We're trying to look through the bill as it relates to what are going to be the standards. Is there an accountability model? Is there some sort of accreditation requirements that follow? Because that's always been the private schools. One concern is what admin creep comes with public money, however it gets there, whether it's through an ESA or tax credit, whatever it is. The reason people choose that setting is because they're freed from so many of those things. They don't want their part messed up in that. They're perfectly willing to be measured, if you will, because they're proud of the product that they put on the field as well. So we've got to be sure that gets right so that we have independent and private schools that want to participate. So we've got to get that part right.
Are you still looking at public-to-public transfer, making it easier for kids to go from public school to public school?
Yes. And our thought, we formed this select committee on education freedom, and we're going to do very similar to how we did House Bill 1. We're going to have one big bill, and we're not copying Congress. Remember, our House Bill 1 was before their big, beautiful bill. We found it's easier. Let's get it all out on the table. Let's get it in the bill. And even if, Russ, if you were voting on it, there may be 7 things in there you like and 1 you don't. But you like those 7 so much that there's compromise there. And I think the nuance and the compromise is what it's going to take for us, because I have colleagues and caucus members who like the portability piece, but they might not like, for whatever reason, what's been referred to as the Tim Tebow Act, or allowing homeschool kids to participate in extracurricular in their local public school district. That's a no-brainer for me. Why we're not allowing that?
That's an 80+% issue. It is absolutely an 80+% issue.
And here's the other thing. If I think the public schools would welcome that, here's why. If you're proud of that product, I say you've got a chance to bring a customer in who might like the extracurricular so much they go home and tell mom and dad, or mom and dad sees this and likes it and is drawn to that product for school as well. I see it as an incredibly positive thing for our public schools.
And look, I look at it more fundamentally back to what you said a second ago, which is those parents of that child are paying property taxes and all of these other taxes. So if they want to avail their child of an opportunity that they are funding, I don't see why the state should say no to that. I think the argument that suddenly you're going to get a bunch of kids leaving public school to become homeschoolers is just insane.
It's insane. I mean, and that has not happened anywhere in any other state.
Yeah.
So those red herring arguments are kind of falling by the wayside. But yes, portability will be a huge piece of that, as will. We want to do some cleanup just in our charter school legislation period. Like that's going to be part of this legislation, but it was almost, and I was part of that. I was here. I was a newbie and standing in the corner. But my first year or two in the legislature, when we were doing the Charter School Act, we had to settle for a lot of things to get that bill across the finish line. Things that it almost makes it set up to fail. Like the handcuffs are on in every way. We want to get them off and let parents make the decisions and let folks that want to start a charter school. Another thing we want to do is on any community college or four-year university, they don't have to go to anybody. If they want to start a charter school there, or somebody wants to work with them, we're going to allow that. That's going to be part of our push there as well. And those are places that are already set up in an educational setting that have space in most instances, especially our community colleges and some of our four-year universities. So that'll be part of it. We want to look at that accountability model specifically. We want to look at our teacher shortage. Is there a way for us to let our retired teachers who have left the classroom for whatever reason, taken that retirement, because at 25 years they can take it, they're still young and want to teach. My mom did it. She retired and then taught private school for 10, 15 years after that. Let's figure out if there's a way to let them retire and still come to work and pay them something less. We should be able to figure that out and not just go, nope, we have a rigid system, you can't do both. And then maybe looking at pre-K, because there are some studies that link that K-4 year to some gains out. And we don't do a lot in that space. Now there's the jury's out on where everybody is on that. But it's something we're going to look close at. And then consolidation. MDE has been willing to have conversations. We want them to do the consolidation. We would like to have one per county, one school district. We're not talking about consolidating schools. We think that organically happens once you get one school district. Our largest, DeSoto County, has tons of schools, all of which almost all of them are excellent in that county. They have one school district.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're trying to bite off an awful lot at once, but hey, there's a model for that based on what happened with HB1. We need to take a brief break. We'll come back, maybe dig in a little bit about what's going on at Jackson, y'all's focus there, election, and then PERS if we have time. We're talking with House Speaker Jason White right here on The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We'll be right back.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission. The nation's longest-running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival, comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
You're listening to The Sit Down on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We're talking today with House Speaker Jason White. We got a friendly comment during the break about the Speaker's use of my last name, which is Latino, and my use of his last name, which was White. And the Speaker referred to us as the Latinos, which is an accurate way to describe my family. And then I referred to him as the Whites, which is an accurate way to describe his family. But if you had just turned on the radio dial, you might have thought, why are these people talking about race this way? The answer is we weren't. So chill out. Breathe deep. It'll be all right.
That's right.
We were talking about education. I know that's going to be a huge priority of you guys. And it sounds like you're looking at a bunch of different stuff, right? Whether it's charter school reform, public-to-public transfers, tax credits, accountability, consolidation. These are things that have all been part of the zeitgeist for a long time. I think the moment is right to make that push, right? There's going to be some political headwind, and you know that.
There will be. And the other little thing I mentioned is we're going to look at some teacher pay things, but it's going to be centered around incentive pay. It won't be an across-the-board teacher pay raise. It'll be more surgical, maybe to areas that have shortages, or things like that, or really looking at performance and that sort of thing. So there'll be some incentive pay as part of this, but money's really not the main feature of our reform package, other than that little bit. And if we do something additional in the pre-K space.
And look, I mean, you guys have front-loaded a lot of investment in education.
We have.
A lot of states that have gone the education freedom route combine education freedom with the stuff that you guys have already funded. You made a down payment.
I feel like we did. And again, I've said it this way. We put our money where our mouth is. Let's show that is our priority, and it is. And that funding formula that came with that that huge increase, almost $300 million, that put us at a historic investment in that formula of over $3 billion last year, which there was not much fanfare about it this year, but guess what? That formula in its second year, it got fully funded again. That's 2 years. That's as many times as MAP was fully funded in 27 or 28 years. So we hit it next year. We'll be ahead. We'll be 3 for 3. So you didn't see many articles about that, but you also didn't hear the arguments either. So I hope we put that to bed, that where our priorities are.
So I know that you guys have been looking at in the House the state's role with the capital city. And that preceded the mayoral election. Obviously, people are, I think, excited based on the feedback that I hear that Senator John Horhn has assumed that office. And I think part of the excitement isn't necessarily even, hey, it's Senator John Horhn. It's like, hey, this is a new opportunity for the city of Jackson. Y'all were already doing some stuff ahead of that. Talk a little bit about what the legislature did this year, and then I just want your candid feedback of what opportunity you see with a new administration in Jackson.
Yeah. One of those committees, in addition to the tax reform committee that we formed last year, when I say committee, formed committees to work in the off season, because technically when the legislature's out of session, committees, chairmen still might call some meetings and do some things, but we're out of session. So we have formed these, what we call select committees, getting our most engaged members on a particular topic. In other words, folks that I know that, in the House that really engaged on an issue, draft bills every year on maybe this particular topic. And I'm like, hey, I'm gonna put you on that committee now. Let's get to work on it. And one of those last year was the select committee on, I think we had a catchy name, Capital City Revitalization or something like that. But it's focusing on Jackson, our capital city, and the metro area. What can we do? And I'll admit I've evolved in that, because in my prior years, and even as I would run for elections, I would have my constituents say, as they saw this bubbling up, I don't want 1 red cent of my taxpayer money spent on the city of Jackson. Let them fix we're fixing our problems locally, let them fix theirs. And I probably subscribe to that a little bit, but I've evolved because you see the importance of a vibrant capital city. And for a whole lot of people, that's all they ever see of our state. They fly here on business. Maybe they land at this airport, come into the city, and that's all they ever see. And they're out in a day or two, and that's their impression. And so, number one, it is a doormat. It is a calling card for our state. So that's number one. And then number two, it is a reflection of every Mississippian. It's our capital city. So we should be willing to help them where we can. Now, that doesn't mean opening up the checkbook, in my opinion, and just saying money's going to fix all these problems and how much do you need, and here we go. But there are things we can do. That committee last year had 5 bills came from that committee that made it all the way to the governor's desk with his signature and have become law. Things like, they're common sense. Some folks might consider them, you mean we need a law for that? But we actually do, to regulate panhandling, all the folks standing on the corner hitting you up for money. Now law enforcement has a tool to deal with that. Camping in public places or on your property. Now law enforcement has a tool specifically to deal with that. That had become an issue here in Jackson, as well as all the blighted property. There's some tax credits now that you can avail yourselves to incentivize you to take some of this blighted property off the tax rolls, which in most cases they've gone through a tax sale and it's deeded to the state of Mississippi. So they're just sitting there by the state. And our Secretary of State kind of takes ownership of those, if you will, but he or she can't do anything with them other than sell them. So we also freed it up to where our Secretary of State, under their watch or out of their office, they can actually clean those lots up and at least get them presentable where you could see what you were buying if you wanted to buy it. So those kind of things, while they're small and baby steps, they were met with a huge positivity from Jackson leaders, and from our Jackson delegation and Hinds County delegation in the metro area. And that committee's made up mostly of either Jacksonians or folks in the metro area that are really engaged. Shonda Yates leads that committee with Clay Mansell from Clinton as her vice chair, co-chair. They did good work. They also looked at Jackson Water and how we can partner there. That's a big issue.
Because the Senate had a proposal to essentially take that away from Jackson by creating some kind of regional committee or something, or what was the? Yes,
and we just, that was met with such aversion from the Jackson and Hinds County delegation. And again, I really don't want the state to run Jackson Water. I want Jacksonians to do that. Now, I do think everybody should get a water bill and should pay their water bill. And we know that more than 10,000 folks aren't or weren't doing that, and maybe not through their own fault. Because I've had people tell me, I tried to go and, say, hey, I want to pay my water bill. Especially old folks, they're worried about it because they're afraid they're going to get a bill one day that's 5 years worth of water bills, which has ended up happening in some cases. So how can we help them? The bill that actually passed last year in that vein allows for a water authority to be formed. And it's a common sense, middle of the road bill that I think makes sense, that most people, even the Jackson and Hinds County delegation, were okay with. That seems to be the way forward, and Shonda kind of led that.
I do think that's important, though, that there is this perception, I think, amongst Jacksonians that when the legislature gets involved in Jackson, it's like somebody from 3 hours away is going to dictate what happens in Jackson. Having the buy-in of the people who actually represent Jackson seems incredibly important to me.
It does, and that's another thing that we're extremely excited about with Senator John Horn being elected mayor is this. While certainly his politics and mine are different on a lot of issues, he still understands the proper role of state government and how it relates to municipalities. He can walk in any door in the Capitol on either end of the building, and that's rare after being around there as long as he's been there. You get enemies, and folks remember when you didn't vote for their bill and all that sort of thing. But he's well respected on both ends of the building, and he has an open door at my office anytime, and he knows that. He and I are friends. So I'm excited about that. I was really proud of my House members. They actually got a table at his inauguration dinner, black, white, Republican, Democrat, lots of members of that select committee on Jackson, and attended that bipartisan effort to show that support that, hey, we want to be part of this solution in whatever way we can. So we're excited about the future as it relates to that. That committee is going to continue to work. And while they're looking still at that water and monitoring that, they're going to continue to look at other ways that we can be a partner, to Jackson. And of course, Capitol Police and the Capitol Complex District and all that as it continues to evolve and get a little time and history under its belt. We think that's been incredibly positive too for the city.
Yeah, and look, I said earlier on the program a few weeks ago that competence invites confidence, and if Senator Horn can build the right kind of staff, the right people around him, and demonstrate competence, that's going to invite confidence from people across the state. Because I agree with you 100%. At some level, Jackson is our capital city. We can't afford to abandon it, right? We need to figure out ways collectively to improve on those things that need to be improved on, and then candidly to harness the things that make Jackson a really cool place to be.
Yep.
You see some of that right now, like the restaurant scene in Belhaven and some of those areas where it's like Jackson can be cool.
Yep.
And so I'm glad y'all are working on that. I will say anecdotally, my own water experience in Jackson, Ann Harlan and I lived in Belhaven for 4 years after we graduated from law school, and we wouldn't get water bills and this was back in 2006, wouldn't get water bills for months and months. And like those people you described, finally I'd pick up the phone and call the water department and say, hey, I hadn't gotten a bill in a while. And a bill for $1,200 would show up the next week. I'm like, all right, 4 months of water is about $200, give or take. And I literally would write a $200 check and send it back to him and would never hear from him again. So it was this weird little game we were playing with each other.
It's wild.
Where it's like, he called and asked for a bill. It must mean he has got a little little jingle in his pocket.
Let's see how much he's got.
$1,200. Let's see. What's your counter offer? I know elections are a thorny subject. It is hard to get election reform passed through either chamber because very frequently legislators will start to look at it and go, well, how is this going to affect me?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so I'm curious. I know you've said elections is a priority. What all are you looking at?
Specifically, a couple of things that I've had different House members, not just here's my first 2 years as Speaker, but even in my prior legislative career, I've had different legislators that wanted to plug in on certain issues. And because of the sticky nature of election law, and anytime you're moving those pieces around on the board, you're right. Folks immediately first look at, well, how's this going to affect me in my race? And then number two, what are the politics? And this isn't one of those things that gets you a bunch of clicks on your Twitter page or Facebook page, but it's incredibly important. And most members if you know, because you're plugged into everything going on at the Capitol, toward the end of session every year we do a suffrage bill. And a select few folks who, if they know the right person, their legislator, they get their name, and if they've paid their debt to society and all their fees and everything, lived a clean life since they've gotten out of incarceration, that sort of thing, they're eligible to have their suffrage or voting rights restored through legislation. And as we look at that, I started reflecting on as well in small town law practice. You'll have people walk in your door and they want to know how can they get their voting rights restored. They're a convicted felon. They've been clean for years. They've got a family. I've never had the local drug dealer show up in my law office and say, I want to get my voting rights restored, or a thug show up. It's been a person who's gotten their life back on track, and it's an impediment either in his workspace or her workspace to maybe a promotion or the next certification, or it's just a dignity thing. It's not, I just don't see it as some way for bad people to get involved in elections. And that's kind of the misnomer they say, well, no, they lock them up and throw away the key. And part of that is they can never vote again. So we want people to be rehabilitated and re-engaged. And for those individuals who want that next step, I just think there should be a path for that for us. And the House passed a bill 2 years ago or last year, 5 years after you've done everything, including paid all fines, fees, and lived clean for 5 years, you could petition your local circuit court to have those rights restored. We thought that was at least a reasonable first step. So, and hey, Price Wallace, who was chairman of our Constitution Committee, I'll put his conservative bona fides up against anybody's any day, and he was leading that charge. And so we're going to continue to look at that really close and look at other states and let's see how we can do it, as well as some form of no excuse early voting. Like people on both sides of the aisle, and other states are doing it. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel there. Maybe it doesn't need to be for 2 months or whatever, but we should have some form where folks aren't invited to lie and come in and vote absentee. There should be a way for folks to vote early at a convenient time where they don't miss work or have to get a babysitter, whatever it is they have to do. So we're for that. And that's a delicate thing. And the governor and I have had conversations about it. He's not crazy about the idea. And some of my Republican colleagues aren't crazy about the idea. But by and large, and most folks center around more people voting is better for our society. And our participation is low. There's no denying that. And you're fixing to see that in these special elections we'll have. We'll be lucky to have 20% participation in most of those. So what can we do in that space that kind of threads the needle there?
And look, I'm a day of election voting guy, so I get where the governor's coming from on that.
I do too. I'm sensitive to that.
I think that we already have early voting with mail-in absentee ballots, which I would argue, as long as someone's willing to lie about why they're not going to vote in person, is actually less accountability than an in-person early voting system.
That's correct.
Right? So in some ways, if you're worried about the integrity of the election, I would be much more concerned about our existing mail-in ballot system than an in-person early voting system comparatively, if that makes any sense.
If you've ever sat through an election contest where folks are examining absentee ballots and did they sign right and did they do, like, early, if you just have a brief window there for folks to come in early, I tend and have traditionally been the guy who said, no, elections happen on election day. If it's important enough for you to vote, you'll go do it on. But I do see folks who for whatever reason, that might drive their participation more if they're able to do it and not, my mom's just, she's 84, my dad's 88. It's a deal to get to the poll, and we hope everybody's well on election day and not sick or not at the doctor's office. And so they vote absentee now. They just voted in their municipal election absentee. My mom doesn't like going up there and lying about where she may or may not be on election day, but that's the method we have. So if you had a machine set up and you voted the same way you do on election day, that cuts down on any potential for fraud or mistakes as compared to our current absentee system. And that's what Noah Sanford he's our chairman of elections in the House. And that's been his point is, look, let's take what we've got and just make it better. Not necessarily open up the world, but make it better in a way that might ease some of those tensions.
You were mentioning Price Wallace. I've got a funny Price Wallace story that was at my expense. So when Andy Gibson vacated his seat in the Mississippi House, and there was a special election to replace him, Price was one of 6 or 7 candidates. And for some reason, they asked me to come moderate a debate, right, between these candidates. And me being me, I had a list of policy questions. And one of them was a hyper-technical Medicaid question. And in fairness, it wasn't a question that anybody probably could answer off the top of their head. And Price looked at me and said, "Mr. Latino, I have no idea what you just said. Nobody on the stage has any idea what you just said, and nobody in the audience has any idea what you just said." And riotous laughter. And, of course, I'm sitting there a little blush, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And I walked out of that room, and I told somebody I was with, I said, he's going to win this election.
And he did.
And he did.
He did. He's a great member, and he brings a certain levity to our group. When we get off track a little bit, he'll be like, "Hey, y'all, hold on. Let's bring it back to." And when he speaks, people listen.
So we've got 1 minute left in the program. Anything that you want our audience to know that you guys are working on or proud of?
Well, we're going to work on these things that we've talked about, and I tell folks all the time, I wish the process wasn't so ugly, and I wish it was not such sharp elbows sometimes. And when people say you don't want to see the process, that's probably actually, there's a lot of truth to that. But I am proud of the product that has resulted, and this year specifically, with the huge tax cuts, a modern infrastructure funding system, PERS finally stopped digging the hole, and a very conservative budget. Those are things for a term, much less for 1 year. So we'll take the gains however they came, and we're going to continue to work hard.
Well, I know all of those issues are at the forefront of a lot of people's mind. One of that you didn't mention was the ballot initiative. Maybe we'll have you back on. We can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, we're going. That committee's going to look at that. That select committee is going to look specifically at that. The House has passed it several times. We're going to try to find a happy median for our Senate counterparts.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Good to be here.
Good to see you again. The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting Think Radio, funded by generous contributions from listeners like you. Today's show was produced by the ever-effervescent Germaine Flood, with live stream production by maybe Abram Nanny. I don't know. The list is actually blank, but I'm going to improvise. For my guest, House Speaker Jason White, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy at 11 a.m. coming up right here next. And join us next week for an edition of The Sit Down. We're going to change pace. Chef Derek Emerson will be in to talk a little bit about Mississippi's food scene. Hope you have a great Wednesday.